Hi, friend. So happy to have you today for the Enneagram and Marriage Pod. We're talking about how your type processes conflict with author, podcaster, philosopher, former pastor Jeff Cook. He's a fellow Christian. He is married in a 1-3 pairing. He is awesome to share with us about conflict as we close out our attachment journey this week. And we're always doing attachment work here, guys. Know that for sure. But especially this month, we've been talking all month long about how to attach well to family, to friends, especially to your partner. And today we're carrying more of that on and God, because as Jeff was reminding us on the pod, as you'll get to hear, he's like, relationships are all we get to bring to eternity. And so allowing them to be as healthy as possible is in all of our best interest. And it allows us to see other people in our lives as eternal beings. And that is always humbling when we're tempted to feel like I'm better than you, etc. The human fundamental attribution error. So I'm delighted to get to bring you to this place where you can hopefully put on some Enneagram learning with us in terms of this whole concept of how do we use our Enneagram types to work through conflict. We've talked about it in the past a while back, but I think when we think of attachment, we need to look at it again because we need to see how each of us will do so. Like we may have a 2 saying, "Oh, I'm going to flatter you," or a 7 saying, "I'm running away," or a 1 saying, "I'm going to come off with some judgment." And we need to look, how do we get through this? It doesn't mean we're going to change our types. And sometimes we think, oh, I've got to change my type or I've got to use my arrow. But what Jeff's going to help us to learn today is how to use our types that we already are to just have better relationships with who we already are in our own typology so that we can bring the best of our 3 or our 4 or our 7, whatever type we are. So you're going to love his knowledge. Make sure you go to his show also because he has the Around the Circle pod and he co-hosts it. He also has a book that you'll see in the show notes right here. It is a really good Enneagram book. I'm so grateful for it. And all those shows that he's doing over there are so full and packed with knowledge as well as he brings his philosophical, theological, and Enneagram knowledge to you in that type 1 way. So he does it well. And I hope that as you guys tune in today, you'll also take part in something else special happening, and that is Dan and Becky Allender have just actually gotten ready to launch their new marriage course. And you might remember Dan and Becky Allender as some of the leaders of the Christian world in terms of trauma care, and we love knowing that they've done so much work over there to be the co-founders. Dan is of the Seattle School. You've been probably hearing his name for years and years in terms of the trauma space, but they are gifting everybody with some more teaching. And so I just want to let you know that there's a special listener discount that you can get in the show notes because as of tomorrow, they're starting out this wonderful new class on marriage. And it's called Growing in Marriage, A Guided Journey with Dan and Becky Allender. And it's going to be Tuesday, February 24th at 2 p.m. Pacific time for the first class, but there's a couple more dates in March and April for you as well. So you will learn how to work on conflict patterns in your marriage, understand yourself protective strategies. You're going to learn to share your stories with more honesty and also practice a more relational dance. So I want to make sure that you definitely allow yourself that space to really just dive in and allow yourself to check out that as well as Jeff's book in the show notes. It was perfectly timed. We were actually cross asking because my friend Bina, shout out to you, Bina, thank you, was saying we need to have Dan and also Steve Call on the show because she's doing a phenomenal class with them. And then they were writing us about this at the same time. So we're so grateful to be on that same journey of trying to help couples, individuals. And I just thank you for being here today. We're going to go ahead and get ready to talk to Jeff now. You're going to learn so much about conflict today, but from an Enneagram lens. So just make sure you're ready to learn, take a deep breath, listen to it again if you just even want to soak up more. This is that kind of episode. All right, let's dive right in together. Jeff, we're so thrilled to have you on the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Thank you so much for delighting our audience.
Thank you for having me. I've been really excited about this all week.
Oh, I'm so glad, me too. And not only do we share the love of Lord of the Rings, but obviously the Enneagram. You have done such a deep dive, you and your beautiful wife, Kelly, and your extended Enneagram crew that you have so many connections with. You have just put a beautiful book together. But today we're talking about you and the gift you have to share with us about conflict. So, as we get started, could you tell everybody a little bit about you, your family, your type, Kelly's type?
Yeah. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm from Carbondale, Colorado. I live in Greeley, Colorado. I've been here since 94. Went to school at the University of Northern Colorado, got my graduate degree, and then came back and taught philosophy here for 15 years. Met my wife here. She teaches at UNC presently, and I do content creation around Enneagram. So there's not a lot of overlap yet with academics and Enneagram, but that's a big ambition of mine right now. So
Wow, that is a big ambition and a good one because you guys collectively have so much education. And what are your types?
I'm an Enneagram 1. She's an Enneagram 3. So we are fashioned to be a power couple, as it were. It's just all action and results. And what are you doing today? That's the primary conversation in our house.
Mm.
But I really love the energy of assertive types like
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and just getting a chance to respond to the energy that I see there. So it's a good dynamic for us.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's why I'm with my husband who's a one. But it's so fun to have different people. And when I say fun, of course, I'm saying that in the lens of a seven. Challenging, hard, painful to have people of other types who also bring out the best in you. And then you're like, actually, that was fun because they helped me. But I'm saying that because I was curious if you think your emerging kids, as you play around with their types, do any of
Hmm.
them seem to have that challenging, different space that might be a little not quite so fast paced as you and Kelly?
Right. Well, my kids are both grown,
Yeah.
and so I got a 20-year-old and a 21-year-old, and so we know both their types. I have an 8 who is on the spectrum, and a 5 who is in Michigan right now. Started studying architecture this year, and so the dynamics of, and we'll talk about this, I think, with our topic, the dynamics of fives, eights, ones, and threes in our house. That chemistry has a lot of great benefits, and there's a couple challenges, and we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for being vulnerable to share. And we were talking before we got on. Obviously, when we share about our families, we have to share from a place of respect of them and who they are and what they want us to share. And I think our audience wants that for us. Of course, they also want us to dig in where we can so they can learn from our personal examples. So thank you for being willing to do that. That
Of
sounds like a
course.
very interesting family dynamic. Today, we are going to talk about conflict. So many people do not remember, just because there's a lot to remember with the Enneagram, that one of the beautiful ways you can use this tool is to talk about conflict with it in a very helpful way. And you do this in your book. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how we can open some of the locked doors that we have with conflict. I liked that concept you brought into your book. I believe it was talking about fours at one point, but just the concept of opening where we're locked with each other. How does the Enneagram in general help us to do that before we get into some specifics?
So I do a lot of theory. Conflict and what we call coping styles is one of 4 ways that you can divide up the Enneagram into triads that is real clean. But
Mhm.
what our work kind of pushes into is that when our motive isn't being fulfilled, each of the types naturally pivot off of one of the centers and elevate the other 2 centers. And it's worth naming for each of the types how this happens. But
Mhm.
we call this coping style. I think we're borrowing that from Riso and Hudson. But the idea is that we have a way that we prefer to solve problems, and that's going to be very um, emotional. We want other people to respond to our emotions.
Mhm.
For some of us, we shut down emotions and really push
Mhm.
into action and thinking. And for some of us, we push more into a positive spin, which is kind of shutting down our thinking center and just saying, look, let's focus on getting our emotions a little bit more upbeat, and that will solve the problem. And so each of the types gravitates to one of those 3 places when their motive isn't being fulfilled. And it says a lot about relationships and both the things that really work in our relationships and
Mm-hmm.
the places that we might struggle.
That is fascinating because we're really maybe trying to all do the same thing to solve the conflict, but some of us are going about it in a way that maybe makes the other one feel unseen or not valued. Is that what your experience is when you see this
It
play out?
it can be.
Mhm.
So let's just pull ones and sevens out, for example.
Yeah.
Sevens are going to solve conflict by actually shutting down action, and they're going to like twos and nines. They're
Mhm.
going to prefer to solve problems with an optimistic outlook, and so the
Mhm.
pushing towards optimism
Mhm.
isn't about solving problems. It's
Mhm.
about addressing our emotions in the midst of problems. So two sevens and nines all do this when they're not getting their motive fulfilled initially. It's like, well, let's just address how we're feeling and let's get and take on an upbeat attitude,
Mhm.
allowing us to move back forward. That can be a fantastic thing.
Mhm.
That can also come with a whole host of problems. And
Yes.
I imagine you could speak to
Oh,
this.
yes.
So my beloved mother and
Mhm.
stepfather, who both passed, were a seven and a nine
Mhm.
pairing.
Mhm.
They both solved problems this way. And there
Wow.
were all sorts of things that were beneficial here in terms of
Yeah.
the optimism that came when things were really breaking.
Yeah.
But there was also all sorts of problems that did not get addressed because of
Mhm.
that. And so ones like myself and your husband, we don't do that. When we solve problems, we're going to shut down our emotions and we're going to push into thinking and action. And
Mhm.
so what ones do is we say, what is the right thing to do? We think real hard, what's the right thing to do? And then we act on it. Our emotions don't matter. The problem needs to get solved. The way it's going to get solved is by focusing on the right thing. Threes
Mhm.
and fives do this as well. Threes
Mhm.
are going to focus on achieving the goal. Fives are going to focus on executing the data, very thinking action oriented in their problem solving, but the big idea is that they're shutting down their emotions. And so if you can
Mhm.
kind of name where your partner, where the people in your life, where they
Mhm.
shut down when problems hit, it can be really, really helpful.
That's really different than I've ever heard this concept talked about. And I love that you're naming it because there's a lot we can do when we know the actual mechanism that's going on behind. When we just say, which we've said many times on this podcast, ones, threes, and fives are logical, four, sixes, and eights are reactive, and two, sevens, and nines are positive. We might get into some specifics, but when you add in what we're leaving out, there's a lot there where I'm going, oh, aha.
Mm,
Okay, I'm seeing why sometimes Wes and I don't move forward. I'm seeing sometimes, I'm sure every listener here, why we don't sometimes move forward. So, would it be okay if we went through those three groupings a little more
please.
slowly? And okay, awesome. So that people could really hear that. And I think you started with these positivity groups. So you're saying that two sevens and nines, we tend to repress action, which is, I
Yep.
thought, oh my gosh, so interesting because I'm always thinking of myself as an action type. So tell us more about why we repress doing when we're feeling, well, we want to be positive. Tell us more about that from what you've discovered.
Big idea for us. And this is going to come, our book is the introduction to a 5 book series. Our third book is really going to elevate this idea. So this is coming in 2 years. But the to go down this path, what we see primarily is in the Enneagram, you
Mhm.
are made up of 3 centers, and the most
Mhm.
important thing for you to name up front is that you have emotions,
Mhm.
you have an intuitive body center, and you have a thinking center.
Mhm.
Every type has this. And part of the art of living is kind of moving through those 3 centers because as it stands, it's really hard to be in all 3 centers at the same time.
Mhm.
Generally, we pivot. So with two sevens and nines, I'm going to take twos and sevens first.
Mhm.
Twos and sevens live in a space where, how's this work? Their secondary center is their intuitions, is action.
Mhm.
So twos, if you were to look, twos are on the line with one, sevens are on the line with eight. So they share that line with the intuitive center. Their
Mhm.
secondary center is action and intuition. When they're not getting their motive fulfilled through their strategies, what
Mm-hmm.
they're going to do is shut down that secondary center and they're going to pivot to their repressed center. So for twos, that's thinking, and for sevens, that is feeling.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to elevate um, feeling and thinking. And this creates the coping style. So both twos and sevens, when solving problems, they're elevating thinking and feeling. So action doesn't matter. If action had worked, they wouldn't be experiencing a problem. So there's like a pivot. What do we need to do here? Well, the
Mm-hmm.
two comes in and but having thinking and feeling at the forefront, they say, look, I am here. I can help. That's not about action. That's about getting the person in front of them to connect with the two and give them the attention that they desire because
Mm-hmm.
that's the two's motive. The two
Mm-hmm.
wants to earn attention by being positive, by inserting themselves, by saying, look, I have the skills to be beside you through this problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about action. It's about them feeling a certain way, being positive, getting the other to see them. For the seven, it works kind of similarly. If acting on your thinking would have gotten you what you wanted, you would have had what you wanted.
Yeah.
So action gets shut down and there's a move towards, look, let's be positive here.
Mm-hmm.
Things are breaking. We all know this is awful.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably go over there, don't you think? And it's
Mm-hmm.
more about assembling the troops. It's more about getting them to change their minds. It's more about like, look, I feel like we should probably get out of this sticky situation and go
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else. But it's not about action yet. It's about changing one's positivity. And nines are the are kind of off to the side here for a second. Nines are going to double down on their repressed center. So
Mm-hmm.
nines already their repressed center is action. So nines don't do productive action. And when problems emerge, they're going to see action as the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
so nines take on that. Look, I just need to think more optimistically. Everything's going to be fine. And what that's doing is they're really trying to change their own perception of the problem. They're trying to get comfortable. And that's real common for nines. So all of that is kind of taking on a positive outlook that will solve the problem. That's the strategy for those three types.
Wow, that is really making sense to me. And I love that we can hopefully put an action to those here who feel like, yep, you just nailed it. How do I get back into action? Or is that the step? Because I want to make sure I read the book carefully about this.
Yep. So what the coping style does, you're pivoting in order to get back to center. So in our view, your best self is when you're seven or when you're centered. So you should not aim at becoming a five. We think that's a mistake.
Mhm.
You being a healthy seven is the goal. So
Mm,
naturally, what's going to happen is in your sevenness, you
mhm,
are seeking a motive, a target,
mhm,
which you could articulate better than me, I'm sure, in terms of pursuing joy, in terms of feeling happiness, seeing other people feel happy, and
mhm,
living in that space in a healthy way, in the healthiest possible way, where you're centered, you're present, and and you're living a flourishing life.
mhm.
When you don't feel like that's happening, and when the targets that you have in front of you aren't getting realized, or perhaps when other people aren't coming with you,
Yeah.
that slight move to problem solving can always be there. So you're going to pivot off of action for a minute,
Mhm,
elevate your feeling center, and that's where the coping style comes in. Let's all
mhm,
be more optimistic. Let's be more positive. Let's get to that place where we can all flourish together. So,
mhm.
do you see that in yourself?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really something I've always said, oh, I guess this is my reactivity on either side of me, but it wasn't a
Hmm.
perfect answer. But I was
Hmm.
like, you're a seven and you're positive, but I guess when you do go to the emotions, it's because you're really close to those wings. And so if the seven doesn't work, you're strategizing there. But I also really appreciate you saying, no, you're going into your feeling and thinking. And it's for me, and the experience would be almost on hyperdrive. um, I've got about balanced wings on the six and eight. And so it doesn't mean
Hmm.
they're always used healthily. It just means I use them both actively, healthfully and unhealthily. And so I think that's good for you to remind us that doing might be the missing piece in a way, because I am already, or even managing those emotions better. I am learning that already. But
Hmm.
I feel like maybe I'm missing getting into action. Is that what you think our two sevens and nines are doing?
What ends up happening, and again, so this is the big idea for us. You have three centers, and we move through the three centers in terms of trying to get our motive. Enneagram is exclusively about motive and
Mm-hmm.
how we get our motive. And
Mm-hmm.
if that gets missed, you misunderstand what the Enneagram is.
Mm-hmm.
Notice this for sevens, and this is what our third book is about. You move into that positive, optimistic space.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work all the time.
Right.
And when it doesn't work, there's a new movement, and that's when you fall into stress. And notice what happens in stress, you are going to shut down your primary center. You're going to shut down your thinking because you're in one space, and ones are thinking repressed. Ones act on their intuitions. And this is how sevens work when in stress. Everything becomes, they grab hold of the one tools. Everything
Mm-hmm.
becomes very present. I'm going to fix the problem right now so that I
Mm-hmm.
can get back to happy time. And that's the natural move for sevens is through that you're centered in your seven space using you're thinking about what you're going to do
Mm-hmm.
in seven space. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. You put on the optimistic outlook. That doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to shut down my primary center, which is thinking, and I'm going to intuit my feelings and the feelings of others. One of the things that I see with sevens, I see this all the time with both my father and stepfather are sevens.
Mm-hmm.
When things really break, they become very aware of other people's emotions and trying to fix the thing. They become
Mm-hmm.
very aware, specifically. I mean, it may be the case that they're responding to my mom or stepmom,
Yeah.
but they're very aware. Okay, something got broken. I'm responding to you. Let's fix it. And
Mm-hmm.
once it's fixed, I get to go back to party time. And that describes a lot of their
Right.
energy at the home when things break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And would you say this is where our virtue of sobriety wants to come in instead? And this is where we need to dig down and do our work to say, I see myself making these bypasses to just fix everything. And instead of being positive, we go back to that place of quiet, of stillness, of pausing, slowing. Would this be what a seven might want to do, or even a two or a nine? If, well, I know the two and the nine would be a little different here, but yeah, what would you say would be a
Yeah.
good thing we could do if we know we're going to be positive and then we're going to make these other shifts?
Framework for us goes exactly where you're going, where we need to think about all of the elements of the Enneagram with a high side and a low side, a healthy side and an unhealthy side. So your problem solving is neither healthy or unhealthy. It really depends on how it gets executed, that positive outlook. But so too, when you move into one space, that's not always negative. You can go to the high side of one and really pick up the rich tools that are there
Mm-hmm.
that healthy ones would normally exhibit if they were in your shoes.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also go, obviously, to the low side of one, which becomes much more resentful, which becomes much more, filled with
Critiquing.
anger and
Yeah.
yeah. So when you bring up sobriety, what is taking place there is, in my view, and I need to do more. This is our fifth book. This is how we're going to close the book with virtues. So I haven't done any of this study yet. So this is me shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
It seems to me that is a description of the high side of seven. That sevens who have really thought through their place in the world and what truly brings happiness
Mm-hmm.
are going to arrive at something like a sober posture. That is their judgment. Sobriety isn't always about your body, it's also about your thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, sobering your thinking, sobering your body, elevating your feeling center, these are characteristics of a healthy seven.
Mm-hmm.
And the really flourishing sevens that um, we could talk about will commonly push into sobriety as they understand that they have that gear of addiction, and so
Mm-hmm.
part of living well for them is really pulling back, restricting, but doing so in the virtue for sevens is wisdom, doing so in a very wise way, in a way that elevates other goods in the place of cotton candy substitutes.
Thank you. And just, I think everyone listening is hearing, you know, all of these learnings with the Enneagram go together. That
Truth.
there's a lot of different good strategies that you can take for yourself if you're mindful. And you're reminding us that your line of thinking here is that being aware that you tend to go to the positive in a conflict if you're a 2, 7, or 9 is the
Hmm.
starting point, and that it's not always bad. In fact, it might
Correct.
be a high level behavioral modification, sort of quick fix on something very light. But if there's something that's deeper and you're high, you're light, you're addictive, this is a moment to say, hey, am I like looking as a 2 pridefully for attention? Am I a set? I love how you put the triads, the centers of intelligence also in the book, you guys. He does a great job with that. Am I looking for some sort of safety as a 7? Am I looking for some sort of, what do you say, justice or rightness in the book for the ones, ones, 9s and 8s? I can't remember the name. Intuiting.
Oh, sure. The body triad wants agency. We want agency, we want control. That's our primary motive is we don't want other people to control us.
Okay, yeah.
And that
So
above all is kind of forefront in terms of how we are in the world.
yes, and that can be so frustrating, I think, for I'll move to the 1s, 3s, and 5s here, but for I feel like my husband being the one that um it's like at the same time he really wants to be compliant, but he also really wants to find his agency.
Hmm.
So it's a fascinating look. Have you noticed that as a 1 yourself?
I have. Of all things, I have a discussion debate on Wednesday about whether or not compliant is a helpful term for
Mhm.
ones, twos, and sixes are often described as compliant. Our language is responsive or reactive,
Mhm.
mostly because of the one. You could say that ones are compliant to the needs of their super ego. That's where Riso and Hudson go. But it
Mhm.
strikes me that that's getting, in my view, it's going a little too far. What's
Mhm.
actually happening is the one's energy is forefront. It's
Mhm.
external. It is responding to the world in front of them and seeking to establish agency and self-control through execution and doing the right thing. If I do the right thing, I will be in control of myself. If
Mhm.
I do the right thing, I will feel good in my body, which is a primary. And if
Mhm.
I do the right thing, then I will get the things that I need from the culture around me. That is
Mhm.
how I live in the world right there.
That is very helpful. I often use the words on this podcast because I can't help but be practical about it. That's how 7s work with things, as you know. And so
Hmm.
we use the words culturally
Yeah.
compliant because at
For
least that
ones.
gets us a little closer for 1s and for also, I use that for the others in the triad because I feel like even though I see that with our 2s and 6s, sometimes for a 2, they don't want to be compliant to everybody, or a 6, it's only those who they want to be loyal with,
Yeah.
in their cultural framework that's comfortable to them. So I've noticed that we were just talking about it after a church meeting, my husband and I last night, and we don't normally go to those, but he's a deacon, and we were like having to use our date night for partial church meeting, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy for a 7. But I was like, we are getting like old, and we're like needing to like buckle down and do things, and so I was noticing my husband goes, yeah, like I was going to be agreeable to whatever they said. And I was sort of horrified. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if they said like women didn't have a right to vote? Like, please tell me you were going to
Yep.
be, but he would never. And I knew that he was just saying, I trust my group. And he's the social one. So he highly trusts his group. But it was also reminding, as soon as he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is an example of you being culturally compliant, that
Yep.
you were ready to just accept what they were saying. Does that make sense?
It it does. I think that like all things ones, there's a very black and white issue to raise because ones will also be on the front line commonly in revolutions, will be
Oh,
the
yeah.
first to be reformers. So you're
Mhm.
not being culturally compliant if you're reforming a culture. So balancing
Mhm.
that, the would need to you need to take that into consideration. I do think that there is if you want to use the word compliant, it would need to be paired with some kind of foundation that the one is adopting.
Mhm.
And ones, twos, and sixes, as you'll know, all have a difficulty with productive thinking And so a
Mhm.
lot of times we outsource our
Mhm.
thinking to something else. Twos and sixes will commonly do this in relationships,
Mhm.
but ones don't.
Right.
Ones are not outsourcing our power to other people. We are going to something else. I'm a professional philosopher. It will not shock you that I outsource my thinking to my philosophy. And so I spend a lot of time digging into the the ideas at hand, and
Mhm.
that's trying to elevate my repressed thinking, but I'm still outsourcing my thinking at some level because I'm trying to find stability for my mind.
Mhm.
And so one might say that you're compliant to your philosophy, or you're compliant to, your those again, your super ego, your sense of right and wrong.
Mhm.
But I think everybody's kind of I mean,
Yeah.
who isn't at
Right.
some level uh
Doing that. Right.
obeying their not obeying their conscience, or obeying their
Mhm.
conscience. So
My
anyway,
goodness, this is deep and I love this. And
so
that reminds me so much of my husband Wes, who you have this as your focus. He had it as a minor, but his philosophy
yeah,
professor from years ago is still one of our favorites. And he helped him with his philosophy to make it much, much stronger by first knocking it down at his secular university and
yeah,
just
right.
really helping him. Like he's like, wow, this guy's going to challenge every little bit. And he's like, no, I'm just going to get you really, really, really good at knowing all the arguments out there and then bring you back up and build you back up in what you already believe. But I think that it's important that we look at, of course, on this podcast and elsewhere, lots of our listeners, I think a lot of them are Christians, a lot of them are not. And so you just kind of laying it out that whatever a one is
Mhm.
going to be a little different from the twos and sixes because they're going to have this usually a foundational piece. And that's where, in that example we gave, my husband already knew this is a culture I'm already extremely familiar and detailed and in depth with. I can outsource here. He's not going to do that as easily with me. If he believes something, he's not going to be just like whatever Krista wants. Now, he will say that with me and the kids about where we go out to eat or what we do for the evening, as long as it doesn't go against, like you said, the deeper
Yeah.
thing. Now, to take it into the ones, threes, and fives, we're already
Uh-huh.
starting to see the logical framing of the one. And it sounds like threes and fives. Do you call them the logical competency group in this way when they're arguing?
Competency is where we go.
Okay.
Because it's again the case. The big idea here is that they're shutting down one of the centers
Hmm. Hmm.
when addressing problems, and they're shutting down their feeling center. So ones, threes, and fives, when addressing problems, all believe that the problem probably is emerging because of either their emotions or the emotions of the people in front of them. And so this
Mm.
can be very tricky and needs to be elevated in relationships, because for some of us, we solve problems with our emotions. And if our lover, if our partner, if our kids solve problems by saying your emotions are the problem, that
Mhm.
will create conflict.
Yeah.
um, so,
Right.
but one, but the one, three, and five are very suspicious when problems happen of other people's emotions and of their own emotions, and so they push really hard into what feels stable. For the
Mm.
five, it's data. For threes, it's their goals. For ones, it's the right and wrong. And that seems a real clean way of understanding how those types engage. When they're not getting their motive, that's where they go.
And I love that you just brought something beautiful to us in this way. I just want every listener to pause that these strategies are so lovely, even though they're very foul at times. Like
Yes.
being positive as a 2, 7, or 9, or wanting to bring in your beautiful data and these other places and spaces, it makes me happy. Like, oh, great that you want to bring goals in, great that you want to bring rights and wrong in. But what you're saying is we get really like stuck in these ways, right? Like these
Yep.
become divots for us that make it very hard for us and our partner to see the fundamental attribution error in ourselves. I'm assuming that
Yep.
when they're stuck here in these data points, etc., we need to help our ones, threes, and fives remember there's something else you need to do. What would you say that is?
Well, and when they're solving problems in this way,
Yeah, yeah. When
it
they're only solving problems in this way, because we kind of
there
already said it's kind of
I th-
good, but
I think it needs to be named that this is your type. This is how you solve problems. The
Mm-hmm.
question isn't whether or not you can escape your type in problem solving. The question is whether you're healthy when you're solving problems. So if I come to my friend, so this commonly happens with my business partner and with my family, that they are all positive outlook, and I'm screaming about what's broken and needs attention,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a very unhealthy way to scream about what needs attention.
Yeah.
And so what a pushing into the virtuous side is where I go on these fronts in terms of what high side looks like. So, what needs my focus on right and wrong needs to be paired with moderation. It needs to be paired with wisdom. It needs to be paired with me pausing and clarifying my thinking so that I can speak from a position that makes sense to others who aren't necessarily seeing the world the way that I do. It would also need to be focused not both on the person's good in front of me and on my own good. I commonly solve problems at cost to myself, and this is not a healthy way to be in the world. But it is so the balancing of loving others, loving yourself, those need to be married in terms of problem solving, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
And so, though, like in that space is the high side of our conflict style.
That's good. There are some good points that you mentioned, even that ones may think, I'm already moderate, I'm already good. And you're reminding, no, just as, threes are not always perfectly goal oriented, ones are not always perfectly moderate. So you're saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for saying. And plus,
Yep.
in his book, he gives 10 things that each type is like celebratory about each type, which of course I loved.
Gifts.
But yeah, I was like, yes, there are good things. And I think that's why a lot of people don't like the Enneagram when they don't,
Truth.
because they're like, all you do is pick. And that
Yep.
is important. And we all know we need the both and. We need the John Gottman for the marriage circles. We know it's 4 out of 5 positives. But we do need that one growth piece. So you're saying use the great tools you already know are you at your best as a 1, 3, or 5. Use all these strategies, but
Yeah.
also bring in even more from your wings, arrows, from your virtues. Would you say that particularly emotions are helpful for them to bring in, knowing that that's a part of them that gets a little stuck?
Can be.
Okay.
The thing about Enneagram is, again, you are made up of three centers.
Hmm.
Being self-aware of what the tools are for you really matters. And
Hmm.
so it can be the case that for the one, you can just skip solving the problem competently and use a little bit more of your four tool intentionally without so often we fall into stress and our experience of our stress number feels, especially for ones hate falling into four space. I don't know if you feel this way as well. I imagine
Oh,
sevens
yeah.
don't really like one space very much, but
Yeah.
for me, when I'm in four space, it feels really uncomfortable unless I go there intentionally.
Hmm.
So elevating your feeling center as a one for me looks like I need, so fours are um their focus goes inward and they focus on their emotional center. That's the primary for a four in terms of the way the direction of their energy and their
Hmm.
primary center. So for
Hmm.
me, if I want to get like some stability, some grounding,
Hmm.
if I go to that space, if I pause and say, look, I need to get in touch with my inner life for a minute, I
Hmm.
need to stop doing. And that's what actually happens for the one. When they move into stress, they shut down their primary center, which is their body.
Hmm.
Ones will shut down their body. They move into four space. Fours feel their thinking. So you move into that space where you're really in touch more with your emotions internally and reminding yourself, what's your identity? What's yours to do? What makes you unique?
Hmm.
Where is your value actually found? And it takes you off of that production stage loop, I
Hmm.
feel so
Yeah.
comfortable getting crap done.
Yeah, that's same with Wes. Yes.
Getting out of that space and
Hmm.
moving into a spot where no, you need to do some business with how you are feeling right now. That is engaging your four space.
Hmm.
So it's again, those three centers are really basic, but they're really complex at another level. So, how you
Mm-hmm.
relate to each of the centers really matters. And
This
so that's how
is
I'd kind of answer that.
Yeah, I think it's an invitation for people to walk with you on the Enneagram journey on your podcast too, because it's a taste of what you bring the reminder that we're so complex as humans, and often there's a simple step, but it might be any number of things versus like, oh yeah, every single time you are being logical, stop doing that and just go into emotion. And I think you're
Mhm.
saying like it could be helpful. It could be a very helpful moment if especially I think what's beautiful about relationships is where does the dyad want you to go to? Like, what if you're with a partner where if you double down on emotions and you're in this group and they're like very uncomfortable there, it could actually take you guys farther away from the goal. I've worked with so many couples where that's the case, where they want to do behavioral modification. They're both very content there.
Yeah.
Somebody else, though, needs, like, say you're married to a four, they need to know you're feeling this with me at some point. Maybe you can't do it like me, but for that relationship pairing, I think it might be more valuable to say, I am in the 1, 3, 5 space and I'm going to look for that. It may not be the first thing I do because I first may need to rely on my logic. I may need to look at a wing arrow or something else, do my
Mhm.
own work, get regulated, and then come to realize that, yes, one of the things about me is as in this group, I can stifle emotions and this might be valuable. Is that what you've learned? Occasionally it is helpful.
The this will be a through line through all of this. It's that high low, healthy, unhealthy thinking just applies to the three centers. So as you're talking, what I'm hearing is there are people who are maybe really, really, really intelligent and
Mm-hmm.
their emotional life is trash because they have neglected the tools that would really elevate their feeling center and give it the sort of body kind of health kind of virtuous characteristics that would be most beneficial to themselves and to their family. And so, really, the art of living, in my view, ends up being you want to be happy, and happiness is dependent on virtuous characteristics and really doing work on those three centers in
Mm-hmm.
such a way that your mind is healthy, your body, your intuitions are healthy, and your feeling center is healthy. And if you can say that,
Mm-hmm.
man, you can do whatever you want because you will naturally gravitate towards doing wise things, moderate things, courageous things, loving things, faithful things.
Mm-hmm.
These just naturally come out of somebody who is healthy. People who
Mm-hmm.
are unhealthy in these spaces
Mm-hmm.
are the ones who are making bad decisions because their centers are corrupted. So, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
very one-ish answer, by the way, for those of you who know Enneagram. Of course, that's a one-ish answer, but
Right, right. But it's actually good because
yeah,
ones are generally
yeah,
good.
it doesn't mean I'm wrong.
It doesn't mean you're wrong, don't worry. But I do think in terms of safety. And so of course I'm
Yeah,
thinking of
yeah.
the dyad safety as if and as an idealist, I'm gonna put myself here with you, Jeff, for a minute because I
Hmm.
do have a one arrow that I really have worked with over the years for better and for worse. And also a one spouse, so maybe even a bit more than somebody else who's a seven. But it's made me appreciate that one space a lot. It's also made me realize that still going to be a seven and look at the world in terms of safety, but idealism, which we almost talked about that today on the pod with you, but we felt this was timely for the season. But all that to say, for those who are remembering, Jeff and I are both idealists. So neither of us would want to do our relationship care at this most basic, just behavioral modification level of just like we just bypass emotions. We don't go there. We want the whole centered view. We want like our hearts aligned, our minds aligned, our bodies aligned, our even our souls aligned. And when that doesn't happen for idealists, we get a little bit sad, like, wait, what's wrong with the world? It was supposed to be this way. So I'm naming it for you if you're out there and like, guys, I don't like to go to emotions, neither do my spouse. We're sitting in the 3, 6, 9 triad, and we're sitting there happily, or we're sitting there and we're not discontent. I've had people say that on my page where I'm like, oh, your life intimately could be this way, and they're like, I'm content with like being exhausted and barely having any connection. And I'm like, I'm just gonna stop being me for a second and try to put you on and be like, I'm not going to judge you for that. So I just want
Hmm.
all the listeners to hear that even though we might have these goals, they might have different goals in their relationship. And even for you guys, if you don't love emotions and it's working for you, I think what Jeff and I are both saying is we believe going to your emotions and your bodies and your minds are all healthy things, but maybe pace yourself. Is that what you would agree with?
Yeah, I mean, what's yours to do today? You don't like no. I recently destroyed my knee, and it means that all the exercises I was doing I can't do anymore. So I started doing other exercises, and most of these are strength training that have to
Mhm.
do with my upper body. Well, if I was trying to lift really heavy weight on day one, this is a bad idea.
Mhm.
The art of growth, the art of happiness looks like a very consistent, deliberate targeting of, what are the things, what are the habits that I can slowly implement
Mhm.
that always lead to a more flourishing life. So for some of us, it has to do recently. I mean, it's like looking at things like your screen time, or like I've have really tried to give up alcohol in the last 5 months, and that's been a huge benefit
Mhm.
to to me recently.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
the I would love to read more, and so I'm trying to do some things where I'm starting a class that I'm teaching because it will force me to read the books I should be reading. um, and that
Mhm.
sort of thing ends up being, what are the deliberate things that you're doing that end up encouraging those virtues that always
Mm.
lead to happiness? That's, I think,
Mhm.
the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you named that everybody has a different path, but
Hmm.
that we all know these goals are big picture targets. And it's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue with that you should care about your body and instincts. It's hard to argue that you should have some soul and emotional care. It's hard to argue that you should have healthy critical thinking. I think everyone here agrees on that. I think today
Yeah.
I want our listeners to hear that doing the work to get yourself healthy is the goal because you'll be better when you come to your conflicts. Let's not neglect our precious fours, sixes, and eights who've been waiting
Yeah.
patiently. What do you guys
Very,
call this group and what do
very
they tend to
patiently.
do? Yes.
This is the emotional response triad. And the big idea here, you have to catch this. The big idea is that four, sixes, and eights, when something breaks, they're not getting their motive. They want an emotional response from you. They want an emotional response from the people in their lives.
Mhm.
They all want to know whether or not they are seen and whether or not you're on their team. And so this is a shutting down of thinking.
Mhm.
Four, sixes, and eights stop trying to think through problems. It becomes very active and very emotional in terms of pushing for others to showcase that they see the problem the way that the 468 do,
Mhm.
that they have the same set of eyes, as it were, for the problem at hand. And 4 6s and 8s all have, a different way that this comes out, but you can see it in terms of the 8s are going to be the 8s and 6s kind of have that loyalty piece, the authenticity piece. 4s, the authenticity piece.
Yeah.
6s are probably the easiest to see here. It's, are you validating my concerns about
Mm.
our collective safety? They're gonna get very active in that space of problem solving. And again, it's shutting down thinking because they already know what's wrong. They need
Mm.
other people on their team. And so to the eight, if thinking about the problem and doing it would have gotten their motive, they would
Mhm.
have their motive fulfilled. Eights
Mm.
get to spots where their motive isn't fulfilled, where they feel vulnerable, where
Yeah.
things have broken. And if they could have done something, they would have done it. So it's
Mm.
not about thinking anymore. Now
Mhm.
they need to get people on their team, and they need to
Yeah.
push them a little bit. And they need to
Mhm.
see, hey, are you going to stand here when
Mhm.
things break even more, sort of thing? And you can see this
Yeah.
in terms of how that would go. Fours are gonna feel their thoughts. They're shutting down their thinking because other people aren't seeing them. And so that's where some of the dramatic side of fours can come
Mhm.
forward in this space.
Yeah.
It's that they begin to push for folks to give them a little bit more of the attention desired, because that's going to be their primary motive. Twos, threes, and fours all want attention. The four
Mhm.
has been standing in a withdrawn posture, given their
Mhm.
stance,
Mhm.
the four is gonna, when they're not getting the attention that they desire, both they're giving themselves attention but getting attention from others, there will be a little bit more, do you see the world the way I do?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a little bit more forward action oriented, pushing into other people to
Mm-hmm.
expose whether or not they are seen. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
primary for the four. So all of that, you'll notice, it's not really about solving the problem for four, sixes, and eights. It's about their people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very much a relational way of solving problems of, do you see my emotions?
And that is why I both struggle and joyfully accept these parts of all of us. I know we all have a bit of these, one of these numbers within us, depending
Hmm.
on wings, arrows. And I think some of us are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like if we're an actual four, six, or eight, we're like, this is it, guys. And then the others of us are learning. You do make some great points, but I'm also feeling frustrated by maybe you forget something that's right and you're like be on my team, but
Hmm.
it's like we've left what's right and wrong for each other's team and that's not okay, or we've left what's safe for each other's team. So I like how relationships can help line us back up if we're being over the top, and I think
Hmm.
this group can get in that way over the top where they forget some of the other parts of what's healthy, in we're coming right back to feeling, thinking, and doing. So if you're a four, six, or eight, be aware of your thinking, be aware of your other options through this dark time in nature where you might be more tempted to feel alone because people don't understand you. But as you
Yep.
begin to open up to what could be going on, you might say, oh, wow, as I remember, Jeff reminded me that I can get really stuck here. And if I just allow some critical thinking or one of my movements on the Enneagram, then I could perhaps see other perspectives and find my way out. Because I do think this group can hit some despair
Yep.
if they don't
Yep. Yep.
find their way out because they're so relationally focused.
Yep. Notice how this may be a stretch, but it's coming to me as we're talking. Notice how this plays out in culture and what people kind of want. In some spheres, in like changing the culture, there was a movement a while back called Me Too movement.
Hmm.
Notice how much that is about seeing somebody else's pain and even identifying it and saying, look, I see the world the way you do, because
Yeah.
I also experience those same sorts of pain. And that's
Mhm.
how the problem's getting solved. Or you could go to something like, like political commentators. They're saying, look, your feelings don't matter. They're
Mhm.
even maybe calling people snowflakes and the rest. What
Mhm.
matters most is thinking about the political problems and executing the actions that are going to get us from here to there. And so much
Mhm.
of what's on, the TV or on some social media ends up, it can gravitate towards those
Yeah,
two
you're right.
positions because they're trying to solve problems. And there's a whole third group who are the comedians. A
Mhm.
ton of sevens are
Yes.
on stage just making fun of
Mhm.
how terrible things can get at times. And
Mhm.
let's just laugh about how dysfunctional everybody is right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is, all right, let's
Mhm.
take a positive outlook and let's engage the problems with a little
Mhm.
bit of humor. And
Mhm.
we're all in that space. So here would be just like, here's an action step, super easy action step. What
Mhm.
is your partner's type? What's your kid's type? And know how they solve problems. And then when the problem emerges and they go into that space, just name, okay, I see that you're trying to solve this problem by pushing into what's right. And I just want you to
Mhm.
know I see that. And I see what you see as the right solution
Mhm.
that washes over me. I'm on your team. Like I
Mhm.
see that you're trying to fix this problem, or that this is the goal, or that this
Mhm.
is the data for the ones, threes, and fives. For the four, sixes, and eights, and this may be tricky. So when you were talking about your own sevenness,
Mhm.
and you've seen four, sixes, and eights go into problem solving, you're a head centered type. And
Mhm.
so when they shut down their head, that's
Mhm.
probably going to be difficult for you, right?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I want to
So
kind of buckle down, like you said, and like lead the troops back.
that's it. That's it. So being able to just like at some level, stand apart, look at the whole situation, meet them, love them the way that they're asking to be loved, because they're clearly in that spot where they're trying to solve a problem. And that can be very, very beneficial. And so too for the 2, 7, and 9s, not neglecting the positive,
Mm-hmm.
not poo-pooing the fact that, you know, not, just dismissing the optimism,
Mm-hmm.
but really honoring it and saying, you're right, we should take a better posture, better,
Mm-hmm.
a higher outlook here. That can be real valuable.
Yeah.
And because we're all in this together.
Yeah. I love that you named that. And there's no one perfect person out there who's doing this amazing. Like, we can't just be like, well, watch her or him. Like, they always get it right. Like, none of us always get it right,
Hmm.
unless we're looking at God. But when we look at each other, we can take little elements. I noticed I said that to Wes. The other day, it wasn't anybody either of us was even close to, neither did we want to be close to this person. But I said, I like how this person brought a little lightness in. And of course, we both kind of said, might have been a 7 wing 8 or something, but we weren't like, this is a person we want to get to know better. We just observed them for a moment and said that was
Hmm.
needed in that moment. But actually, we kind of were judgy because we were like, we think they do that all the time. And that's probably so annoying. But like, we were just not in a healthy space, I guess, in that way. But we were
Hmm.
observing this person brought this to our group. We appreciated it. I'm sure people see Wes or I with all the time that lens of like, they bring this, they don't bring this.
Hmm.
And when we can do that, we can say, thank you. I appreciated that light moment you brought. And you were also doing your work. And I think where we get into trouble with when we see people who are like pretty healthy doing things and then we judge them and we other them, we say, I'm sorry, you made a mistake. I'm never talking to you again because you're this type or you're that type. And I think what you're encouraging is please see that they do bring a good gift.
Yeah.
But of course, try to bring more holism. Try to bring something a little more than just that thing. Because when I had talked to Wes about that person, he was like, "Yeah, that person is kind of funny, but like they don't seem to bring a whole lot of other virtue." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I can see why we're not close to that person." So I guess even for us to know, don't just be your type, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Wow.
We share a Christian faith. I was a pastor for 12 years. The the reason God has made anything is to fashion an everlasting community in which we will all dwell together with God in the center as the sustainer and most glorious inhabitant. In the relationships that we have, and one of the reasons your podcast really matters is it's actually eternal work. The relationships that we share with one another are the only thing that's everlasting. That's it.
Mhm.
You can't,
Mhm.
nothing else that you see will
Mhm.
last forever except
Yeah.
for your connections with the people in front of you.
Mm.
Doing that work never is a mistake. Doing
Mhm.
that work will always turn to your benefit in terms of saying, who am I? Who are they? And what does the connection between us look like?
Mhm.
That has a singular energy that we see nowhere else in the universe. There's a couple 100 billion galaxies, each with a couple 100 billion stars, and you alone have the ability to connect with another human being in those ways. It is a treasure. And it's the only thing that's everlasting. Um,
Mhm.
Never a mistake to invest in your relationships in these ways.
Thank you. That speaks to me, and I hope so many listeners. If you're like me, guys, and you're like, I will give up my doing relationships sometimes in order to just think and feel about them. And my type 4 daughter, who is we're both 4, 7, 9 doppelgangers. So we
Hmm.
do the
Hmm.
different orders, but we can both stew and do that. Thankfully, we have 3 social people that help us to be out and doing what you just said. But if you're like Hannah and I, sometimes you can get a little lost there. Please know that we are doing the work with you. It's painstaking, it's treasured, it's beautiful, but sometimes every single day we have to say what Jeff just said to us that, this is healthy, this is good, this is everlasting work. This is, my niece and I were just talking about it yesterday because we're going to see one another for Thanksgiving and we live in different states and she's also very close to me. And we were saying we both have some unforgiveness and resentment towards people, but we were like, you feel that way about that one more, and I feel that way about this one more. And we were saying, like, we know that people have that toward us, and we were just owning it,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
she's older now. We were like, we we are not perfect. We have a lot of things that people get annoyed with about us. And when we really see that we're the prodigal son's brother, but also the prodigal son, like we will stop being like, I'm better than you. So I just want to name that if you've ever thought, I need to cut people out because they're not nice. Like, take a breath, do the work. Occasionally, you do need that full boundary. But most of the time, like you said, Jeff, we need to keep tearing with each other, don't we?
It's true. It's true. I don't know. There's more to add there. Aside from the more that you grow in this material, like it just gives you more tools for
Mhm.
exactly that kind of work. So
Well,
it's one of the reasons that like I've essentially bailed all my other careers because this is the place I want to live because this actually does really meaningful work. So
oh my gosh, thank you for doing that. We thank
yeah,
you for being a one who wants to do the right thing and keep us in relationships that are healthy. Your one-to-one subtype also really gives us that courage. Guys, make sure you're listening over there. Your book is a treasure. Please tell everyone where they can find you. This has been such a joy.
yeah, a couple things. One, you could go to aroundthecircle.org. You can see a fantastic interview I did just 2 months ago with Christa. It was
Oh
my favorite interview of the year so far.
gosh.
The well worth finding. She had a lot of great things to say about subtypes in that interview, and we had a great time. The book that we have is Around the Circle. You can get it on Amazon. I have two other books. They're on Christian spirituality. One is called Seven, which is on the Beatitudes and the Deadly Sins, which
Mm.
has some overlap with Enneagram. And the other one's called Everything New, if you want to get into a little bit more philosophy and Christian thinking. I did that. And otherwise, aroundthecircle.org, we have college classes. We're hoping to do a whole slew of more interviews and panels and really trying to make that a hub, a real vibrant hub of Enneagram study activity at a higher level. So
Wow. Thank you so much. That is such a great gift to us. And everything is in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jeff.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Krista. I appreciate you.
Hey guys, that was so nice to get to connect with Jeff over all of these different conflict journey pieces. I think that the biggest piece I took away was doing my own work and being the best of seven, the best of one, the best of five, which are my growth patterns. And I hope that you will allow yourself to think of one thing from today's episode that you're also taking. Maybe the spiritual component, it may be that you're getting ready to go grab his book, maybe listen to his pod. Maybe you're also just taking a moment to say, I need Dan and Becky's marriage class. I'm checking that out in the show notes too. Either way, thank you so much for joining our time together today. As always, it's a delight. I look forward to seeing you soon. Talk to you later. Bye bye. Thank you again for listening with us. It was so wonderful to have you. I love knowing we're doing this journey together, not perfectly, but with love, grace, and hopefully some fun too. If you loved today's episode, make sure you leave us a 5-star review at Apple Podcast or Spotify so others can find it too. Visit our show notes so you can get all the links from today's show, as well as enneagramandmarriage.com, the Instagram, the Facebook, and all over the place. Make sure you spread the word. Love living intentionally with you. Bye-bye.